We're grateful that our panelists are willing to be vulnerable with you guys and ask those types of questions. So we just want to encourage you guys to ask questions as well. So as we go through this panel today, if you guys have any questions, just put them in the Q&A, and we do have the ability to make them anonymous. So we just ask that you guys are willing to be vulnerable as well. So first off, we'd like to introduce our first speaker, who we have is Brent Dean. He's a man who's been successful in the church, the real estate world, the youth, and community engagement. So Brent, we are excited to hear your story today.
All right. Hey, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, so I was asked to, first of all, kind of tell my story. I know that can be lengthy and can be a, long drawn out thing. I don't want to make it as much about me as I do want to make it about our opportunity to learn from each other and grow from each other. But to give a briefing on who I am, and I've lived a lot of places, so my purview on race relations is in my opinion more well versed than most people, just because I've lived a lot of places. But I was born in Texas and lived in New Mexico, lived in Tennessee, high school in Indiana, and I came here and went to Chicago suburbs and lived there and came back here. So that has been a blessing for me and afforded me an opportunity to really see race relations from a national perspective and understand how things are different, but not really, pretty much everywhere. It's definitely helped dispel the myth to me that racism is a Southern issue, because that might be the biggest lie they tell. So yeah, for me, I've been able to work in real estate and met a lot of people, made a lot of contacts here locally. One of the reasons I'm here, and one of the things I really appreciate is what you guys do there through mixed staffing. I came to Grand Rapids on purpose in 2000 because I learned that it was a top 10 at that time region in America to do real estate. I knew real estate was going to be my passion and what I would pursue. What I've come to learn is that opportunity here is not evenly handed out, not in Greater Grand Rapids. And what you guys do through mixed staffing is much needed. Forbes did a study just a couple years ago and determined that Grand Rapids, Michigan specifically, was the second worst city in America for minorities to do business. That's troubling, certainly. And, I went to Chicago and it was like, oh, wow, I learned in that space, in that time, in 7 years, I was promoted and almost ran my own division for Chase for their consumer direct lending division. And I because I started to get opportunities based on my merits. And I started to realize what that felt like, and understanding that I don't have that here is a sad thing. So that statistic is a troubling one for me, and one that I appreciate you guys working directly against. And what is even worse societally about that statistic is the one that it's also paired with. Because get this, in the same year, you can tell me that we're the second worst city in America for minorities to do business in, yet they determined us to be the third best city in America to raise children and to raise a family. I can't tell you how disgusting that is to me, that those two things can coexist. Screams issues in our society. If you can marry together both that, well, we're not going to give Black people opportunity, but it's that because of that. Now, yeah, this is great for families. That says everything I could possibly say about it without even saying it. But there's, a lot of experiences that you get through that. But to deal specifically with the police brutality side of things, inequities is a big job. It's a really big job. And I think, I'm glad that, while in my opinion, it's a low bar, I'm glad that I am starting to hear from the majority that they are, quote unquote, ready to listen. I've heard that quite a bit recently. I've chosen to, again, take the perspective that that's not a slap in the face, that it's taken till 2020 for you to even hear me. But as opposed to that, decided to say, okay, well, if you're going to listen, I'm going to talk. So the police brutality side of things is a whole nother discussion all in and of itself. I personally Not that I feel it should matter, but I want to make this part clear as I speak on police and my experience with them, is that my record is my full record of any kind of criminal anything as it has to do with police officers is a speeding ticket at I think 17 years old. So to this day, that is it. Yet I've actually been searched 8 times by police officers. One time they actually called drug dogs to a scene. Um, and I grew up in a household where my father is a contemporary Christian music artist. Actually, now he dedicates his time to volunteering for the prison systems. He goes into the prisons, and tries to reach the souls of the forgotten and the ignored. So that's what I've grown up in a Christian household and grown up around Christian people and in churches. That's just my experience. Um, and that's just who I am and what I've been about and what I've been taught to be about. Yet, despite all those things, despite knowing that I was never a threat to anybody, I've been harassed, is to put it lightly, by police officers, especially the early part of my life. Because again, I started into real estate when I was 18. I was fortunate enough from a timing standpoint, not that I was incredibly talented or special or better. I don't know. God's blessed me, but my timing was such that interest rates were unbelievable when I started. There was what they called the refi boom in 2001. And I did very well financially. So I drove really nice cars. I had, Lexus with the big wheels. I mean, I'm a young man. I had the money to do it. I got sell that one, went bought the Cadillac with the big wheels. And they just messed with me on a consistent. I mean, I pretty much always knew it was guaranteed I was going to get pulled over, all the time. Like I said, searched is 8 times. We're not even talking about pulled over. I don't know. I can't count that number. So just knowing that those dynamics, the dynamics they create mentally for Black people are very dangerous. It's a common thing or a known thing society where people always say, hey, Black people don't snitch, and we don't. And some might think it's culturally like, oh yeah, that's us because we're cool and we don't, we got this. No, the truth is we don't, and it's sad, and it's dangerous, and it should be embarrassing. Why it should be embarrassing to police specifically? Why we don't? That's because we don't find protection in them. That's not what we view when we think of police officers. I'm speaking generally here. I'm sure there's some people who may have a different experience than this, but generally speaking, we don't find comfort. We don't find protection. We don't find a resting place, a place where we can lean on and say, oh yeah, they'll take care of me. When I hear police, I'm not calling the police on somebody else because I've dealt with them enough to know that could turn into me going to jail. And those are the things that we have to deal with on a daily that really affect our day-to-day lives that, make things difficult. And that's a poison pill that is a dangerous one. That we don't find comfort in police officers. We don't trust police officers. And then that distrust leads to several more issues and layers. And, so those are the types of things that we need society to recognize, and we got to be deliberate about trying to fix, because if not, as we're seeing already, it just creates compound issues. The arrest rates are disgusting for Black people in the United States. And, we're looking at a world right now in 2020 where we have more Black men in prison than we had enslaved in 1800. So to Black people, it doesn't feel like freedom. It doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like it's more of the same, but the approach has shifted. And this is a conversation I had yesterday with a gentleman also. I said, yeah, what's changed? What's changed as it relates to race? Has race relations gotten better from when you were a kid to now? And this was an older gentleman. And he said something to me I found poignant, and I wanted to bring it up. And he said, yeah, it has He said, I wouldn't say changed. He said, I'd say it shifted. I said, what do you mean by that? He says, well, when I was a kid, um, you know, they'd call you the N-word to your face. They don't care. You knew who was racist, and it was out front. This also was a guy that was Southern. You knew it was racist. It was out front, so it was overt. He said, 2020, I feel like there's not less, but now it's covert. So it's shifted in that regard, that you don't get to know when someone is disadvantaged, you know, when you're being disadvantaged because of your race. You interview and think, well, I can't look at that person and think they're racist, but man, I thought I killed that job interview, and you may never know that's the reason you didn't get a call back is because of the cultural disconnect or because of their unwillingness to accept you as a black person. That makes life in a lot of ways even more difficult. Uh, you know, and that was something that he brought up to me that I thought was profound in that. I'd rather almost know exactly who they are so I can stay away from them. But you know, there's challenges that we're gonna deal with probably for the rest of our lives. Uh, but I'd love the fact that people are willing to listen now and talk more about it. So I look forward to more to the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you, Brent. I was trying to type things that I thought was really great to pinpoint on, but again, I agree. I appreciate you hitting on, you know, I've heard a lot of the notions that like once you become successful, it will subside. And you shared your stories of how you can still face those same sense of discrimination. So thank you for your willingness to share. Next up, we would like